mean, where does the idea, the dream, the passion come from to start to have, bison on land? Like, where does that come from?
Okay, so I'll back up. In 2004, when I was about to graduate high school from Sulphur, I'd already had this vision of being a wildlife major. Mm-hmm. And, well, fortunately, we have the Chickasaw National Recreation Area in Sulphur, a national park. You grow up looking, well, there's a herd there.
Yeah.
There's a small herd in the park. And so you just grow accustomed to seeing them every day, and you're like, that's a cool animal, and you're lucky if you could see them at the Buffalo Lookout. Well, my Oklahoma history teacher, her husband was the chief of resource management. Now, it's a fancy term, but he basically took care of the wildlife side, the ecology side of the park. Well, her husband did that, and he said, I've got 2 spots open this summer. And I'm like, oh, perfect. I can work in a national park in my hometown. I can go to Stilley, come back, and do this. And so that's what I did. I worked there, I think, 4 summers. I was a GS5. I got into the government. That was my first step into the National Park Service, and I got to take care of those bison. So I'll dive into that. He said, Steve, my boss, he said, okay, one of your responsibilities on a daily basis is to take care of the bison. And so I said, heck yeah. So me and my brother-in-law, he wasn't my brother-in-law at the time, but Daniel, we worked there together. He graduated from Sulphur. He's a year or 2 older than me. And we were the summer interns, essentially. But we were like full-time hirees or whatever. And we got in the government vehicle that we were issued, and it was a Bronco. I want to say a Ford Bronco. No, our Chevy Blazer. It's an older Chevy Blazer, and white. And we drove it out there, had 4-wheel drive, lock-in hubs, and we pull out there, and there's a big bull out there, and his name was Crooked Horn. He's actually, he passed away in like 2008 or so, and he has this weird drop down horn. His body is actually a full mounted body in the park. You can go to the Nature Center, Sulphur, and you can see him. And we pull out there with cubes because in the summer the pasture they were on was terrible, and so we would cube them. And so I dove all in. I'm like, heck yeah. So we pull out there and we start cubing them, and basically, to break down what cubing them is from the local feed store, you could buy a 50-pound bag of little cubes and 3/4 size cubes, cattle cubes, essentially, like a 14% or 20% protein. And that's what you gave them as a supplement because there wasn't a lot of grass back there. Yeah. And that's what we did. And I just remember feeding him out of my hand, and his massive head and his structure and his everything he had. I'm like, this is amazing. This is an awesome animal. And of course, we pulled some shenanigans back there to test them and figure out, there's some stories I can't say on here, like in the National Park Service, wearing a uniform. Yeah. But we definitely learned a lot about bison and what they could do in that back pasture. Nothing bad, just being
guys, right?
Just being dudes. Yeah, you're going to test your limits of stupidity. Kind of being sort of safe. But I just saw that interaction with them, and I was just pulled in, man. I was done. And I was like, this is a sweet animal. I love it. Yeah. This is like nothing compared to sheep.
Right.
No offense to sheep people or cattle people. You grow up looking at cattle, and it's just a normal thing. And I love beef, still eat beef. So it was just, I was in love. And so every day, we were able to go and check them mostly. Anyways, because that's kind of my role in the wildlife ecology. So that's where I got hey, I want to go work in the National Park Service. Yeah. And then it didn't work out for me, whatever. And so that's where it led me to teaching.
Yeah.
So that's my first step up close with a bison. And so from 2004 is really where I was hooked. Then when I went to Stillwater, there was one of our classes, animal husbandry. I don't know what class it was. I did a 20-page paper on bison. I got to choose what animal I want to do. And that's where I learned about their history. I didn't know a whole lot about their background. And so that's where I learned about, the 30 to 60 million populations that they had in the 1800s, and then, kind of the decline of them. And so I was like, here's an animal right here in my hometown. They have such a cool story. And that's where it started buzzing in my head. Like, I told my boss, it's like, I'd love to be a part of this and raise these animals someday. That was 2007-8, right? 10 years later, my wife supported me in that and jumped on board with me. And, now we have
That's awesome.